Hola mi gente, MsMalcolmHughes here. Welcome back. Today we are here to discuss this beautiful cover, Their Eyes Were Watching God by Miss Zora Neale Hurston. Let's get right into it. Hey, good people. All right, so Their Eyes Were Watching God is a beautiful telling of the story of Janie and her journey for her search for inner peace. She does eventually find that peace. Many people would argue that this is actually a love story, the story of Janie and Tea Cake, but upon reading the book, I would say that that is a drastic oversimplification. And so we begin the story with a very beautiful opening, really poetic, really kind of like abstract and esoteric, with Hurston writing about the motivations of women and men. And then she has a great opening line, which is, ships at a distance have every man's wish on board, so that hope and that desire. But after that really just abstract opening that is beautiful, but it situates you in the story in a way that doesn't really prepare you for what's coming next. And that is, we are then introduced to Janie, who is returning to the town of Eatonville, Florida, without the man that she left town with. And there used to be a restaurant in DC called Eatonville. It was some really good food, but it's no longer there, unfortunately. A new company bought it, and they changed the name, changed everything. But that's off topic. Let's get back to this. And so Janie walking up in overalls and not the way she looked when she left, in her like dress, and happy with this man. This of course causes her neighbors to gossip and speculate about where she's been and what's happened, and how this younger man she ran off with obviously played her for a fool and took all of her money. And they're, murmuring, but they're not saying anything to her, just to themselves, as they do. And I really like this because I love the way that Zora Neale Hurston wrote it, and I'm going to share it. What's she doing coming back here in them overalls? Can't she find no dress to put on? Where's that blue satin dress she left here in? Where all that money her husband took and died and left her? What that old 40-year-old woman doing with her hair swinging down her back like a young gal? Where she left that young lad of a boy she went off here with, thought she was going to marry? Where he left her? What he done with all her money? Betcha he off with some gal so young she ain't even got no hairs. Why she don't stay in her class? Throughout this book, I just thought Hurston did a brilliant job of like dialogue and capturing people. I will say one tip that I found useful for me is when I first started, because it is really written in a southern drawl, is I would read it in modern day times in my head to get myself used to it, and then eventually the language, my brain naturally adjusted to the language of the book, and it was very easy to follow. But initially I did have to read it in modern times for myself, and because you have to situate this in modernity and what's happening now, because even though this book came out in 1931, I believe, 1930, in the 1930s. Let's just look, because I know originally I kept saying the 1920s, and that's right. Yeah, this book came out in 1937. And one thing though is that people don't change. So people will remain people throughout time, even though language and customs may change and evolve over time. So I thought she did a great job, and that's throughout the book, of just capturing the language of people. I also like how she differentiated between the way the men felt about her, the way the women felt about her, and what they were saying and just their thoughts. And the women are like, why she got her hair down and why she's doing all this, and that will come back up again later. And that's the women and the men are admiring her because she still look good. And it very much put me in the mindset of Sula. If you haven't read Sula by Toni Morrison, check it out. Also, for those of us who know, we say Toni Morrison is the GOAT, and she is, but who was Toni Morrison reading and admiring? A Miss Zora Neale Hurston. So, dig into the history, figure out who our greats were reading, really understand what shaped and impacted them, and get some of this good literature for sure. All right, so let's get back to the summary. So yeah, we have Janie. We get a lot on her background. What ends up happening is she comes home. She's had this whirlwind love affair. She's back. The people in her town, Eatonville, the first Black incorporated town in the U.S. Let's talk about it. At least one of the first. It's stated that it is the first, but at least one of the first that's been recorded. So big ups to that. It's actually like a real place based on a town, and Zora Neale Hurston's dad was there and her parents. I believe her dad became the mayor at some point. So definitely a rich history. But she comes home and she goes home, and the only person who actually goes and asks her what's going on is her best friend Phoebe. And Phoebe, even though it's like, girl, where you been? How's everything? And they talk to have an honest conversation. Phoebe's like, everybody is gossiping. And Janie tells her, listen, I'm gonna tell you the truth, and you can tell them, because speaking, your mouth is my tongue. Okay. So Janie tells Phoebe her whole life story. And so many twists, so many turns. We opened up with her grandmother. And her grandmother was pissing me off because her grandmother had a hard time with her daughter, who is our protagonist, Janie's mother. And her daughter was sexually assaulted, and she couldn't really control her after. And so she really is gung-ho on controlling Janie. And so with that, she tells her of the hardship she's had. She catches Janie kissing some random boy or some random man, because Janie then been out here looking at the trees and the nature, and she is feeling very adventurous and very romantical. And so she kisses him first time, and the grandmother sees it, and she's like, oh, you grown now, we gotta get you married. And so she marries Janie off to this older man who, has all these acres. It's a big deal. And Janie is not happy. But Janie goes into it optimistically, thinking that she'll find love and love will come. Love does not come. Now, while she's with this older man, eventually, because her grandmother's really not trying to hear that she's not happy. She's like, you being ungrateful. But eventually the man kind of changes his attitude. He wants to turn her into a workhorse, and she's not here for it. But she meets this one man who, is talking good to her. He has aspirations. He's like, I'm about to go to this black town, and I'm about to be up. It's about to be a time. Like, I'm going to go and I'm going to establish things, and you should come with me, and I'm going to make you my wife. And so, Janie leaves her husband, goes with this man. He does what he says, marries her. He goes to this town. He has money. He talks good. He's very convincing to the people. And not only does he speak well, and he, has this persuasive nature to him, he has money. He backs up what he's saying. So he becomes the town first mayor. Janie becomes Mrs. Mayor. And he really works to, squash her spirit. He really just wants her to be a kept woman. He's like, you don't need to speak. You don't need to do nothing. And the men in the town love her and admire her, and they appreciate her beauty. So he makes her wrap her hair up. And she is very diminished and downtrodden during this time. But, she stays with him for the long haul. He was a little older, and as he gets older, he begins to be very emotionally abusive and manipulative towards her. And some more things transpire. But eventually, she's no longer in this marriage. So that was Joe. So Joe was her second husband. Then she meets T-Cake, this young bull who comes, and he's flirtatious, and she ain't had a good time in a long time. And he takes her to do all the things that Joe wouldn't take her to do. Because, like when the people were saying, stay in your class, Joe had her on this higher status. And was like, you can't be socializing with these people. We run this whole town. Like, he was the mayor. He was the store owner. He was the landlord. He was everything. And so I also really like the way Zora Neale Hurston wrote this up, and how the people interacted with him. And it wasn't just admiration, and all of the feelings and how that evolved and changed over time. But T-Cake comes along, and he's excitement, and it feels good, and it feels pure, and it feels true. And he's like, run off with me. And she does, child. She does, and they're in love, and they're out there on the muck and the swampland working, living life, going through their hardships. And then a hurricane comes, and also T-Cake was a little sketch at one point. T-Cake was suspect. I still don't agree with every decision he made, Miss Hurston. But, they made it through. Janie was head over feet in love with T-Cake, okay? So where she was going without him, nowhere. But I also like the way Zora Neale Hurston talks about the racial issues going on there, and the dynamics and how folks are. And she covers so much But eventually, you know, things transpire with tea cake. I won't tell y'all all the details. I want y'all to read it. It's really, really tragic. And then Janie goes through this very stressful one day. And, you know, it broaches a conversation within the Black community about the killing of Black men. And it's a very interesting topic of conversation, how people say, like they were saying, just something that I don't believe to be true at all about Black women and white men. And it's a conversation that's probably still relevant to this day. I think it has shifted and evolved a bit, but I appreciate Zora Neale Hurston for broaching a lot of topics. Overall, you know, Janie comes back. She gets back to her town, and in the end, she does find what she was looking for. She does find that love she was looking for. And the ending of this book is one of the best I've ever read. I loved it. Y'all know I'm big on endings, and the ending for this was chef's kiss. This book is great. The dialogue was so good. Any cons that I had with it really were they're really just about things that are happening in the book, not about anything about the book itself. I think the book is brilliantly written. I love the dialogue. I love the characters. Very authentic, real people. You're in it. You're in the place. The scenery, I love the prose as well. I think Zora Neale Hurston has done something immaculate in the sense that her dialogue and her prose are both equally great in this, and the shift is so seamless. I also really loved, there is a Henry Louis Gates breakdown of Zora Neale Hurston at the end of this book, and I love him talking about her as the mother of the Black novel, and what we have is literature. And shout out to Alice Walker for bringing her back into relevance. She was kind of forgotten for a while, and so this is such a feminist novel in the best way. The first of its kind, honestly, especially from a Black woman writer, and just honestly brilliant. I loved it. I would highly recommend everyone read it. You know, my scale, read now, read later, read when you want, read it now, okay? She deserves it. This book deserves it. I have many books from Zora Neale Hurston. I'm hoping to get some more of her catalog. And yeah, I'm so glad I read it. I think I may have read it or started it years ago once I started reading it, but I'm so glad I read it at this point, got to experience it again. It was truly great. I can't recommend it enough. There was so much to unpack here, just about like women and the journeys and the trajectories we take and finding our own identity in ourselves. But also the way Janie was a ride or die for tea cake. Listen, so the dynamics within men and women as well, and poverty and access. There's so much here, so much that we talk about to this day. So though it was written in 1937, it is timeless. So read it. That's it for me, y'all. Today, as always, I'm MsMalcolmHughes, one who believes that books are sometimes better than people. And until the next one, please remember to give time, to be kind to each other, and to have the very best day of your life on purpose, peace, o double. Adios. Ciao.